It was a crime so gruesome, so disturbing, that even hardened investigators were left shaken. A young woman with a bright future, her whole life ahead of her, was reduced to a series of body parts, carefully dismembered and discarded, as if someone had hoped she would simply vanish. But secrets don't stay buried forever. Ella Jones wasn't just any high school student. She was a star, popular, talented, and adored by many. As the captain of her school's cheer squad, she embodied the image of perfection. But behind the flawless routines and the bright, confident smile, there was something darker, something she kept hidden from even those closest to her. A secret so dangerous that it ultimately cost her life. Investigators would later piece together a chilling puzzle, a forbidden affair, a desperate cover-up, and a brutal crime that reeked of betrayal and rage. The way she was killed, dismembered with almost surgical precision, raises a terrifying question. Was this a crime of uncontrolled passion? Or was it something far more sinister, something premeditated, calculated, and cold-blooded? What kind of person could do this to a young woman? What was so damning that someone was willing to go to such unimaginable lengths to silence her? The answers lie in a tangled web of deception, manipulation, and obsession. At the heart of it all is Christopher Duke, a man once seen as a mentor, a leader, and a coach. But was he really the monster behind this horrific crime? Or is there more to the story than meets the eye? The details of this case will send shivers down your spine. The late-night text messages, the final chilling words Ella sent before she disappeared, and the damning evidence that eventually led to the shocking truth. But even with the conviction, many questions remain. Was Duke the only one involved? Or was there an accomplice still lurking in the shadows, free from justice? Stay with me as we uncover the disturbing truth behind Ella Jones' brutal murder. A case of love, betrayal, and a deadly secret that someone was willing to kill for. Ella Jones was the kind of girl who turned heads wherever she went, not just because of her beauty, but because of the energy she carried with her. She was electric, the kind of person who lit up a room the moment she walked in. Smart, ambitious, and fiercely competitive, Ella had dreams that extended far beyond the walls of her high school in Austin, Texas. She envisioned herself cheering for a top college team, maybe even going professional. But life had other plans, plans that ended in the most unthinkable way. To those who knew her, Ella was more than just a cheerleader. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend. She had an infectious laugh and a magnetic personality that made people want to be around her. Teachers admired her dedication, and her teammates looked up to her as a leader. But as much as people thought they knew Ella, there was a side of her life that she kept hidden, a side filled with forbidden whispers, stolen moments, and a secret that, if exposed, could ruin everything. And at the center of that secret was one man, Christopher Duke. Christopher Duke was the definition of respected. At 36, he had built a solid reputation as a top-tier cheerleading coach. He was known for pushing his students hard, demanding perfection in every routine. But beneath the surface, behind the carefully curated image of a dedicated mentor, there was something else, something darker. To outsiders, Duke was charming, charismatic even. Parents trusted him with their children. Students admired his confidence and authority. But behind closed doors, behind the whistle and the clipboard, he was hiding something dangerous. Duke had always been close with his athletes, but some whispered that he was too close. There had been rumors before, murmurs about inappropriate relationships, but nothing was ever proven. And in the high-stakes world of competitive cheerleading, where discipline and personal connections often blurred, no one dared to ask too many questions. But Ella was different. Some say she was his favorite, that there was something about her that made him cross a line he never should have crossed, that their relationship was more than just coach and athlete, that what started as innocent guidance had turned into something far more sinister, an affair that should have never happened. At first, it was subtle, extra time spent at practice, whispered conversations in the hallway. Then, the messages started. Late-night texts, secret meetings, moments stolen in the shadows, away from prying eyes. Ella was young, impressionable, Maybe she believed he truly cared for her. Maybe she thought it was love. But love doesn't end in murder. Somewhere along the way, something changed. Their secret relationship took a darker turn, shifting from excitement to something far more dangerous. Perhaps Ella started to see Duke for what he really was. Perhaps she realized that she wasn't the only one. Or maybe she was just tired of being a secret. Whatever the reason, one thing is clear: Ella wanted out. And that, authorities believe, was what sealed her fate. Because in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Ella confided in a friend. She admitted that she had been involved with Duke and that she wanted to end things. She said he had become possessive, controlling, that he'd started watching her, questioning her every move. And then came the text, the one that would later be a crucial piece of evidence in the case. Did she threaten to expose him? Did she tell him it was over? We may never know exactly what was said in their final conversation. But what we do know is that just days later, Ella vanished without a trace. And when she was found, it was not the Ella Jones the world had known, the bright, ambitious girl with big dreams. She had been reduced to body parts, discarded in trash bags along a lonely creek bed, dismembered with chilling precision, as if someone had wanted to erase her existence entirely. Christopher Duke denied everything. He claimed he had nothing to do with her disappearance, that whatever had happened to Ella was the work of someone else. But the evidence told a different story. Surveillance footage placed his car near the creek on the night she went missing. His phone records showed deleted messages. And then there was the blood, traces of Ella's DNA found in the trunk of his vehicle. The man once seen as a mentor, a coach, a leader, was now the prime suspect in one of the most brutal murders Austin had ever seen. But was it really just a crime of passion? Or is there something more? Something even darker, lurking beneath the surface? Because as investigators would soon discover, Ella Jones might not have been Christopher Duke's only secret. Christopher Duke had spent years cultivating his reputation. At 36, he was known as a skilled, charismatic, and dedicated coach. He wasn't just good at his job, he was excellent. Under his guidance, the team had won multiple championships, and his athletes swore by his methods. Parents trusted him, school officials praised him, and his cheerleaders followed his every word. But not everyone saw him as the mentor he claimed to be. Behind closed doors, whispers surrounded Duke. Some students joked that he had favorites, girls he gave extra attention to, girls who got private coaching sessions long after practice had ended. Others spoke of lingering touches, prolonged stares, and text messages that blurred the line between coach and friend. No one had ever come forward publicly, though, either because they were too scared, too ashamed, or because Duke was careful. Very careful, until Ella. Ella Jones wasn't just another cheerleader. She was a rising star, the girl with the brightest future, and the one who got closest to Duke in ways no one else had. At first, it probably felt like something out of a romance novel. The thrill of the forbidden, the rush of secrecy. Maybe Ella thought it was love. Maybe Duke convinced her it was. But as time passed, something shifted. It wasn't exciting anymore. It wasn't fun. Duke became possessive. He started controlling who Ella spoke to, where she went, what she did. He would check in at odd hours, send messages that grew more demanding, more desperate. At first, Ella played along. Maybe she believed he was just being protective. Maybe she didn't see the red flags for what they were. But eventually, she saw it for what it was: obsession. And she wanted out. In the weeks leading up to her murder, Ella confided in a close friend. She revealed the truth about her relationship with Duke, the late-night meetings, the hidden messages, the promises he made. But more than that, she told her friend something chilling. She was afraid. Duke had changed. He was angry, paranoid. He told her she belonged to him, that she could never leave. And then came the final warning. Ella, you promised me, Chris. I won't be your secret forever. Those were her last known words before she vanished. On the night of January 12th, Ella was seen leaving her house at around 10:30 p.m. According to her friends, she had seemed anxious that entire day, checking her phone repeatedly, responding with short, nervous messages. Some speculate she had agreed to meet Duke one last time, to end things for good. Others believe he lured her out, knowing full well she wouldn't return. Whatever the truth is, security cameras captured her car pulling into the parking lot of a deserted park on the outskirts of town. A second vehicle, matching the description of Duke's car, pulled in minutes later. What happened next remains a mystery. Did Ella stand her ground, demand that he let her go? Did Duke snap in a fit of rage? Or was it something far more calculated? What we do know is this: Ella never left that park alive. At 11:48 p.m., Duke's car was seen pulling out of the lot. Ella's car remained parked there for another hour before disappearing. It was later found abandoned at a gas station miles away, wiped clean of fingerprints. Her phone was never recovered. Her body, however, was found 2 days later, though body might not be the right word. Investigators discovered her remains in multiple locations, wrapped in garbage bags and dumped along a remote creek bed. The level of precision used to dismember her body suggested one of two things: a crime of uncontrollable rage or something far more chilling: premeditation. Forensics later revealed that Ella had been alive during the initial stages of her dismemberment. Let that sink in. This wasn't just murder. This was torture. The moment Ella was reported missing, suspicion immediately fell on Duke. Friends and classmates knew about their connection, though many assumed it was nothing more than an inappropriate friendship. But as investigators dug deeper, the truth became undeniable. Duke denied everything at first. He said he hadn't seen Ella in days, that any relationship they had was strictly professional. But technology doesn't lie. Police pulled his phone records, uncovering hundreds of deleted messages between him and Ella. They retrieved GPS data that placed him near the creek the night she disappeared. And then, the most damning piece of evidence: security footage from a nearby convenience store showing Duke purchasing heavy-duty garbage bags and cleaning supplies just hours after Ella was last seen. With the walls closing in, Duke finally cracked. But his story? It was something no one expected. In a shocking courtroom twist, Duke's defense team painted a different picture of that night. According to Duke, Ella had been blackmailing him. He claimed that their relationship had been consensual at first, but that Ella had later threatened to expose him, to ruin his career, his marriage, his life. He insisted that on the night of her death, they had met to talk things out, but that things got out of hand. And then, the most horrifying claim of all: Duke suggested that Ella's death was an accident, that in the heat of the moment, she had fallen, hit her head, and died. And, in sheer panic, he dismembered her body to cover it up. But the evidence told a much darker story. Forensics confirmed that Ella had suffered multiple injuries before her death, including defensive wounds. The signs of struggle were clear. This was no accident. And that chilling detail, the one that prosecutors refused to let the jury forget: Ella had been alive when Duke started cutting. This was not panic. This was cruelty. In the end, the jury didn't take long to deliberate. Christopher Duke was found guilty of first-degree murder. But even with a conviction, questions still remain. Some believe that Duke wasn't the only one involved. For someone with no known history of violent crime, the methodical way Ella's body was disposed of suggests planning. Others wonder if there were more victims, other girls who had crossed Duke, who had gotten too close, who had disappeared. If Ella hadn't confided in her friend, would we ever have known the truth? Ella Jones had a future. She had dreams. She had a life that was stolen by a man who thought he could get away with it. But secrets don't stay buried forever. The only question is, how many more are still out there? What do you think? Was this truly a crime of passion? Or was it something far more sinister? Could Duke have had an accomplice? Or was he simply more calculating than anyone imagined? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. January 14th, 2024. It started as an ordinary morning. The sun had barely risen when a local jogger set out on his usual route along the secluded trails of a creek bed just outside Austin. The air was crisp, the ground damp from the night before. But something along the path caught his eye, something that didn't belong. A black garbage bag, torn open at the edge, its contents spilling onto the earth. At first, he thought it was just trash. Maybe some animal had ripped into it overnight. But as he stepped closer, what he saw stopped him cold. A hand, pale, lifeless, severed at the wrist. his breath caught in his throat as he stumbled backward, heart pounding. He reached for his phone with shaking fingers and dialed 911. Within the hour, police arrived, combing through the scene. What they found was worse than anyone could have imagined. More bags, scattered along the creek, carefully placed at different points, almost as if someone had wanted them to be found. When investigators opened them, they discovered body parts, meticulously cut, each limb separated with eerie precision. There was no doubt. This was Ella Jones. A killer's precision, crime of passion or calculated butchery. The moment detectives saw the condition of the remains, they knew this wasn't just an act of violence. It was an act of control. The dismemberment wasn't sloppy. It wasn't rushed. Whoever had done this had taken their time, ensuring that each cut was clean. That kind of precision wasn't typical in crimes of passion. Passionate murders, the ones fueled by rage, jealousy, or desperation, are often chaotic. They involve stabbing, blunt force, signs of struggle. But this was different. This suggested calculation. It suggested planning. And it raised a terrifying question. What kind of person does this? Police turned to forensic experts for answers. The cuts were deep, methodical. Whoever had dismembered Ella hadn't hacked at her body randomly. They had known what they were doing. It was almost surgical. That detail alone sent a shiver down investigators' spines. Had Duke been planning this all along? Or was someone else involved? The disturbing discovery that changed everything. As forensic teams processed the remains, they made a chilling discovery, one that turned this case from a brutal murder to something even darker. Traces of chloroform were found in Ella's system. That meant one thing. She had been subdued before she was killed. She never had a chance to fight back. Someone had drugged her, rendering her helpless. Then, they had gone to work, making sure she wouldn't survive the night. But the worst part? Some of the wounds indicated that Ella had still been alive when the dismemberment started. The realization was horrifying. This wasn't just about silencing her. This wasn't just about hiding the body. This was torture. The evidence points to Duke, but was he alone? By this point, investigators had already honed in on Christopher Duke. His alibi was weak. His phone records were damning. And now, with the discovery of Ella's remains, they had enough to move in. On January 16, 2024, Christopher Duke was arrested. At first, he denied everything. He claimed he hadn't seen Ella in days, that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. But as detectives laid out the evidence, the surveillance footage, the GPS data, the deleted texts, his story began to crack. Then came the most chilling part of all. When confronted with the details of Ella's dismemberment, Duke didn't react. No shock, no disgust, no remorse, just a cold, blank stare. That was the moment detectives knew. They were dealing with something much darker than they had imagined. But even as they built their case against him, something felt off. Because if Duke had done this alone, how had he managed it so cleanly? The level of detail in the dismemberment suggested knowledge, medical knowledge. Had he studied it, practiced it, or had he received help? And if so, from whom? Unanswered questions, the theory that still haunts investigators. As prosecutors prepare to take Duke to trial, a chilling theory began to emerge. What if Ella wasn't his first victim? The precise way she was cut apart, the careful disposal of her remains, the absolute control over her final moments. It felt rehearsed, like someone had done this before. Investigators began scouring cold cases, looking for any unsolved disappearances that matched a similar pattern. While nothing was confirmed, they found at least 2 missing persons cases where young women had vanished under eerily similar circumstances, both with ties to competitive cheerleading programs. Was Duke a serial predator? Had he done this before? Or was there someone else out there? Someone who had helped him cover his tracks? Even with Duke behind bars, the questions remain. Who else knew? Who else was involved? And the most terrifying question of all, was Ella Jones really his only victim? Detectives soon uncovered a tangled web of evidence, one that painted a far more disturbing picture than anyone had initially realized. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about the relationship between Christopher Duke and Ella Jones. To the outside world, he was simply her coach, a trusted mentor who had helped her become one of the top cheerleaders in the region. But behind closed doors, their connection was far from professional. The more investigators dug, the darker the truth became. Late-night calls, deleted messages, secret meetings at odd hours. And then, the most damning clue of all, Ella's phone. While it had been meticulously wiped, forensics managed to recover one final message that had somehow survived the purge. A single text from Ella to Duke. "You promised me, Chris. I won't be your secret forever." A cryptic statement, one that seemed harmless on its own. But in the context of her disappearance, it carried a chilling weight. Had that message sealed her fate? Had Ella finally pushed too hard? Had she threatened to expose the truth, only for Duke to silence her before she could? Duke's denial begins to crumble. From the moment police brought him in for questioning, Duke stuck to his story. He hadn't seen Ella in days. He didn't know where she was. He had nothing to do with her disappearance. He was calm, too calm, but the detectives weren't buying it. They pressed him harder, laying out the inconsistencies in his story. The calls he claimed never happened, the messages he swore didn't exist, the timeline that simply didn't add up. And then came the evidence he couldn't explain away. CCTV footage, a grainy, time-stamped recording from a security camera near the secluded creek bed where Ella's remains were found. The footage showed a dark-colored vehicle, matching the description of Duke's car, pulling onto the dirt road at 11:48 p.m. on the night Ella vanished. It sat there for nearly 2 hours before leaving. Duke had no alibi for that window of time. And the look on his face when detectives confronted him with the footage? That was the moment his confidence wavered. For the first time since his arrest, Christopher Duke was speechless. The lie that changed everything. Faced with mounting evidence, Duke did what many criminals do when cornered. He changed his story. Now, he admitted to meeting Ella that night, but insisted it wasn't what the police thought. According to Duke, she had asked him to meet her at the park because she was upset, not over their relationship, but over personal issues. He claimed she had been drinking, that she was emotional, that she tripped and fell during their conversation, hitting her head. And what did he do next? Instead of calling for help, instead of trying to save her, Duke said he panicked. He claimed he didn't know what to do. That, in his fear, he made a terrible mistake. That's when detectives stopped him, because they already knew he was lying. A crime of control, not panic. His new story might have worked, if not for one critical detail. The medical examiner had already determined that Ella's injuries weren't consistent with an accidental fall. She had multiple wounds, defensive wounds, on her arms and hands. That meant she had fought back. She had tried to protect herself from someone. And the most horrifying part? The forensic evidence suggested that at least some of her wounds had been inflicted while she was still alive. This wasn't panic. This wasn't an accident. This was brutality. And now, Christopher Duke had nowhere left to hide. In a shocking twist, Christopher Duke's defense team attempted to shift the narrative. They painted him as a man who had made a terrible mistake, not a cold-blooded killer. According to Duke's attorney, Ella had become unstable, obsessed with their relationship, and had threatened to expose him. She wouldn't let it go, Duke allegedly told his lawyer. She kept saying she was tired of being my secret, that she would tell everyone, my wife, my boss, the whole school. His defense hinged on one key argument. Things had simply gotten out of hand. They claimed that Ella had become erratic during their final meeting, that she had attacked him, and then in the heat of the moment, he had lost control. It was an accident, they argued. A tragic, impulsive act, not a premeditated murder. But the prosecution had something much darker to reveal. The most disturbing revelation yet. Forensic specialists had been meticulously analyzing Ella's remains. What they found turned an already horrific case into something far worse. Traces of chloroform were detected in her system, proving that she had been drugged before her death. But the real horror? Some of the wounds inflicted on her body had signs of vital reaction. In other words, Ella Jones had still been alive when the dismemberment began. The courtroom fell into stunned silence when the lead forensic examiner testified. She experienced extreme pain, the examiner stated. There is clear evidence that at least some of these wounds were inflicted before death. The implications were horrifying. If this wasn't a crime of passion, If this wasn't just an impulsive act, then what was it? A sick game? A planned execution? Or worse, had Duke enjoyed it? The other woman theory. Did Duke have an accomplice? As the trial progressed, the prosecution introduced a theory that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. They suggested that Duke hadn't acted alone. Investigators had recovered phone records showing repeated calls between Duke and a woman named Rebecca Holloway, a fellow coach and close confidant. Holloway had been one of the last people to text Ella before her disappearance. Even more disturbing, her vehicle, a white Jeep, had been spotted on traffic cameras driving toward the creek at 2:15 a.m., just hours after Duke's car had left. Was she there to help him cover up the crime? Or was she involved from the very beginning? Holloway denied any connection, insisting she had simply been out for a drive. But prosecutors weren't convinced. The defense fought to keep this theory from swaying the jury, arguing there was no direct proof tying Holloway to the crime. And while she was never officially charged, the question still lingers to this day. Was Christopher Duke the only monster responsible for Ella's fate? The verdict: justice for Ella Jones? After weeks of emotional testimony, gruesome evidence, and chilling theories, the jury finally reached a decision. On March 3, 2025, Christopher Duke was found guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated kidnapping, tampering with evidence. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But for Ella's family, no sentence would ever be enough. They sat quietly in the courtroom, holding hands, as the judge delivered the final words. Ella Jones was a bright, promising young woman whose life was stolen in the most unimaginable way. This court finds that the brutality of this crime demands the maximum punishment. Duke showed no emotion as he was let out in handcuffs. And as for Rebecca Holloway, she walked free, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. Unanswered questions. Was Ella Duke's only victim? Even with Duke behind bars, one chilling mystery remains. Investigators have since reopened 2 other missing persons cases, both involving young women who disappeared under eerily similar circumstances.